Hi everyone, it's Abby with the Bead Place and beadplace.net, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to make a Russian spiral bracelet. The Russian spiral stitch is a relatively easy needle bead weaving stitch using two different colors of size 8 seed beads and one color of size 11 seed beads. You can vary the sizes that we're using. The smaller size needs to be about half the size of the bigger size, but you can definitely kind of experiment with it and you'll just kind of get a little bit of a different tension or a looser weave. So we'll look at the materials that we're using today. Before we get started, please remember to give this video a big thumbs up. It really helps our channel out, and leave a comment down below and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Let's get started. The materials we're using today are two different styles or colors of size 8 seed beads. You can use rocailles or you can vary the shape. I'm going to be using some kind of cylindrical shaped beads just so you guys can see the difference between them a little bit. But if you're a brand new bead weaver, I would recommend using two rocailles or like the classic seed shape. So two different colors of size 8 seed beads. Then we also have one different color of size 11 seed beads. Now you can use delicas for this if you want, but it's a lot easier if you use the seed shape or the rocaille shape. I'm also going to be using a beading needle. This needle here is a big eye beading needle. You can find these at beadplace.net. What's great about this needle is that the whole center opens up. The whole center is your eye, so it makes threading your needle very, very easy. So I like using that. They're also a little bit flexible, which I prefer in a beading needle. Now I'm going to be using 8-pound Fireline. This is my stringing material of choice. There's lots of threads out there that you could use, but this is strong and it provides a nice tension that I like to use. The next thing is a cutter. This is just my wire cutter that I had on hand. You could use scissors or a thread snips, anything that's going to cut through the Fireline. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is a bead mat. So that's the surface that I'm working on. This is really important when you're doing bead weaving or seed bead projects because it just allows you to take the needle in and kind of go into the bead without actually having to pick the bead up. It kind of sits your bead in place and stops it from rolling around while you're working. So everything we're using today can be found at beadplace.net, and we have kits available for these projects as well. Let's get started. So as you can see, I've done a couple things to prepare for my bead weaving. What I've done is cut a working length of my 8-pound Fireline. So for me, a comfortable working length is about my arms outstretched as wide as they can go, plus a little bit more. If you are a seasoned bead weaver, you can cut a length of thread that's longer than that. Or if you're a beginner, you can go a little shorter than that. Just do what's comfortable for you. This is a project where we will be tying more on, and that's okay because the beads that we're using have pretty big holes. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my needle. So I'm going to open the eye of the needle, and I'm going to thread my Fireline through it. If you guys hear meowing, that's my cat. We're working from home. Oh, and there he is. So I'm going to thread my needle down about 1/3 of the way down my thread. And that's what's comfortable for me. That's what I like to work with. The next thing that you can see that I've done to prepare is to lay out my seed beads. So I have my 8s in piles on either side of my 11. So my 11 is in the middle. And then what I'm also going to do is label one of my seed beads my 8-1 and one of them 8-2. So that is just so that I can kind of refer to those as different steps in our bead weaving process. You don't have to actually label them, but just know that the first one is your 8-1 and the second one is your 8-2. So for me, I'm going to have the one on my left, my 8-1, and the one on my right, my 8-2. So to get started, what we're going to do is string a certain sequence of beads And after we string this, we won't need to remember it. This isn't really our pattern. This is just what we need to do to set up and get started. So the first thing that we're gonna do is string one of our 11s, then an 8-1, then 2 11s, an 8-2, 2 11s, maybe, an 8-1, 2 11s, an 8-2, and then 1 11. So we'll bring you in for a closer look at what we've strung. The next thing that we're going to do is string that sequence of beads down our thread until it gets to the other side. We don't want to let it fall off the end of the thread. We want to stop about 6 inches shy from the end of the thread. Before we do anything else, what we want to do is make sure that we have our sequence of beads threaded on in the exact order that we need it. So on the end closest to our tail end, opposite the needle, we should have 1 size 11 seed bead, 1 8-1, 2 size 11 seed beads, 1 8-2, 2 size 11 seed beads, 1 8-1, 2 size 11 seed beads, 1 8-2, and then 1 size 11 seed bead. So now what we're going to do is we are going to tie these beads together in a circle. So we're going to be tying them into a square knot, much like if we were making a stretchy bracelet. So we're going to tie them by overlapping the threads at the top. I'm going to take my tail end and bring it through that loop that we've just made. So I'm going to bring it through that circle of beads, and I'm going to tighten it. This is much like how you'd start to tie your shoe. So then what I'm going to do is tighten it, making sure that my beads don't slip into the knot or where my threads are kind of overlapped. Then I'm going to take that right side, that tail end thread, and bring it over and under the other side again and tighten it. So then we've got a square knot. Now, just for good measure, I'm going to tie another one, but if your first one is secure, you're welcome to keep it at 1 square knot. So then we'll give you a look at what we should have. So our 8-1s should be opposite each other in the circle, same as our 8-2s. We should have 2 size 11 seed beads between each of the 8s, and then we should have a knot that is between 2 of the 11 seed beads. Next, we'll pick up your work and you're going to hold it so that you can work counterclockwise. So that's what's comfortable for me as a right-handed person. If you're a left-handed person, you might want to consider working clockwise. So I'm holding my work so that my knot is facing me. And then what's next in the circle is an 11 and then my 8-1. So if I'm starting from my knot and working counterclockwise around the circle, I'm holding it so that my 8-1 is next. If you pick it up and it's not, just flip it around like that and you'll have the right bead in place. So what I'm going to do is pick up 1 8-1 and then 2 size 11 seed beads. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the needle into the seed bead that's directly after that 8-1 on the circle that we were just talking about. So my thread is starting at my knot. I'm going to, with my beads on my needle, I'm going to go into the 11 that's right after the 8-1 on the circle. So I'm going to put my needle in it and we'll bring you in for a closer look at what we're doing. So next what we're going to do is pull your work tight. So pull your needle so that we have a little scallop of beads coming out of the circle. and your 8-1 that we just added should be sitting pretty close to the 8-1 that we started with in the circle. So next, what we're going to do is turn our work slightly so that the 8-2 that's next counterclockwise in the circle should be the next bead that we're able to work with. So we're going to pick up an 8-2 from our work. We're going to pick up 2 size 11 seed beads, and we're going to go into the 11 after the 8-2 that's next in the circle. So again, I'm going to put my needle through and give you guys a closer look. So again, I'm going to be pulling my work tight, so pull your needle through, and you should see that the size 8 seed bead, the 8-2, is sitting pretty close to the size 8 seed bead in the circle. So next, we'll give our work a little bit of a turn again, and we're going to pick up an 8-1 and 2 seed beads and go into that 11 that's directly after the next 8-1 in our circle. So again, I'm going to set it down, give you guys a closer look. So again, we'll pull our work tight, and that 8-1 should land next to the 8-1 in our circle. So what do you think we're going to do next? Yep, an 8-2 and then 2 11s, and we're going to go into that we're going to go into that 11 that's directly after the 8-2 that finishes our circle. So if we're going in the right 11, it should be the 11 that's right next to the knot that started us off in the circle. So again, I'm going to put my needle through and set my work down so you can get a closer look. All right, so we'll pull this through just like we did before, and hopefully we'll avoid any tangles. Yep, all right. So I'll give you a look at what we should have so far. Okay, so next we're going to continue with that same pattern, only we're working on the outside row. Now eventually this outside row is going to kind of cup up, and we're going to start to get a tubular shape. But for now, we're spiraling out before it cups up. There's nothing that changes with what we're doing. It's just the way that our tension starts to grab hold and form the pattern. So starting from the knot where we were before, we're going to get an 8-1 and 2 11s. Now this time we are going to go into the 11 that's after the next 8-1 in the circle, but this time we're going into the 11 that's after the 8-1 that we added first in our last row. So instead of using the inner circle of beads, we're using the circle of beads that we've added in the last step. So we'll have you take a look at what we've done. So next we'll pick up another 8-2 and 2 11s and go into the 11 after the next 8-2 on that outside circle. So we're kind of jumping a bigger gap here. And then we're going to pull it tight and show you what we've done. So you've probably guessed it, we're going to go into an 8-1 and 2 11s again. And here's where we're going to kind of start to pull the tension a little bit tighter. And when you notice that it wants to cup up, you can go ahead and let it. So at this point, it's probably pretty flat, but we want to start allowing it to cup up at this point. So with our 8-1 and 2 11s, we're going to go into the 11 after the next 8-1 on the circle. And we'll give you a closer look. And again, we'll go into an 8-2 and 2 11s and go into the 11 after the next 8-2 on the circle. So I'm going to give you a closer look at what I mean when I say we're going to allow it to cup up. So as I pull this tight and I start to pull my thread, you'll see that it kind of wants to form a little bowl shape. You can go ahead and let it form that bowl shape. So as I kind of transition my slack, it's going to keep kind of forming up into almost like a square shaped bowl. So as we work now, we're going to kind of be able to more easily identify what row we're working on. We've got an 8 and 2 11s, an 8 and 2 11s, an 8 and 2 11s, an 8 and 2 11s. Now you might think, oh, well, I've got 3 11s there, but don't worry about that because that third 11 is actually the 11 from the previous row. So we're about to start a new row. What we're going to do is grab an 8 1 and 2 11s, and we're going to go into that 8 1, or I'm sorry, we're going to go into the 11 after the next 8 1 in the row. So my thread is right here. I'm going to go into that 11 right after that 8 1 and pull it tight. And you'll notice that it'll just kind of fall right into place. And I'm going to give it a little bit of a turn. We're going to go into an 8 2 and 2 11s, and then we're going to take the needle through the 11 right after the 8 2 in our circle and pull it tight. And so you can start to see that it's kind of forming up now instead of out. So again, I'm going to go into an 8 1 and 2 11s, and I'm going to take the needle into the 11 that's after my 8 1 on my circle. So still working counterclockwise the whole way. And now at this point, every now and then I'm going to give it a little bit of a gentle tug, and that's going to transition my slack so that I'm able to get an even rope. So this is kind of a cool pattern because it allows you to put it down and come back to it and know exactly where you need to work. So because my thread is coming out right here, and what's next counterclockwise in the circle, I can see I need to place an 8 2 on top of that 8 2 that's there in the previous row. So I've got an 8 2 and 2 11s. I'm going to go into that 11 right after that 8 2. And with this, you don't really need to worry much about your rows. You can just kind of keep working until you get it the length that you'd like. I'm going to work on this for a little bit, and I'm going to come back to you and talk a little bit about tension. So don't get too far ahead of me while you're working, because it's important to keep your tension pretty tight at the base, but then we need to loosen it up a little bit as we work because we need to have it be flexible enough to turn into a bracelet if that's what we want it to turn into. So you can see we're starting to form that spiral here with our 8s. It looks like we've got 2 rows of the different colored 8s with a thin row of those 11s through it. And you'll see it start to spiral more as we work farther into the bracelet. So when I was talking about tension, you can see here that I've got one going, and this one's pretty flexible. It's flexible because I kind of loosened my tension here. We want it to be not so loose that you're able to see through it like a net, but it still needs to be flexible enough to go around your wrist. So keep that in mind. But it's real important to keep the beginning and the end of our project tight enough that it starts to hold its form and set the pace for that spiral to take shape. So you can see that as I have progressed, I've gotten a little bit looser, so my work is a little bit more flexible. And we are to the point now where I can show you what to do if you make a mistake, and it'll be easy to spot now that we've gotten a little bit farther into the pattern. So we're going to bring in for a closer look to see how you can easily identify mistakes. So you can see here, as we recognize the pattern, that it looks like my next step should be my 8 1. So let's just say I walked away and came back and thought I was ready to do an 8-2. So I'm going to bring my 8-2 and I'm going to show you why it looks wrong. You can see that I've got this beautiful spiral of 8-1s, oh, and then there's an 8-2. So we know that we need to take that out. So there's two different ways that we can take that out. You can either take your needle off the thread and just kind of pull at the beads, or what you can do is take the needle back through the bead that we just went through on our work, and then go back through the 3 beads that we added in the last step. And so that's what I'm going to do here. And then they just pop right off. Now, another step that I catch myself doing frequently is I add my 8-1, but then I forget to add those 2 little seed beads. So then I go through, and I usually don't catch it until I get around to the next row. But you can see, let's say I would be around working on my next row. If I were coming from here and needing to go into my 8 or into my 11 after my 8-1, I wouldn't have any 8-1s. So you can see if I'm coming from around this side and I'm wanting to go into my 11 after my 8-1, I wouldn't have any 11s to go into that would work and fit right in the pattern. So that's another way to recognize if you've made a mistake. So I'm to the point now where I'm ready to start closing my bracelet off. So one thing to keep in mind is you want to kind of tighten your work back up again as we continue. And how I like to do that is I just like to give each step a little bit of an extra pull. Then I kind of wiggle my slack a little bit so it's more even. If you notice there are any inconsistencies in your tension throughout the bracelet, that pull and wiggle technique, so just pull and wiggle, that can help you even out the slack in the bracelet itself. So another thing that I can share with you is I always like to end with my 8-2, and you'll kind of see why. It'll look not quite finished if you don't end with an 8-2 sometimes. So I've just went through my 11 after my 8-2, and I'm going to take the needle then into the 8-1 that's next in the circle. And when we're doing this, we want to make sure to pull it really tight. We're going to try to cinch it almost as tight as it looks on the other end. So after that 8-1, I'm going to go into 2 of my 11s. And then the 8-2, and then 2 of those 11s, and I'm going to pull it really tight each time I go around. So I like to go around the very end of my circle a couple of times, and that's going to cinch it up so that it looks similar to how we started. So I'm just going through the 8-1, and my 2 11s, and my 8-2, and my 2 11s. And you'll see that it kind of looks like it should carry down more, but instead of going through that next 11, I'm going to skip and go over into my 8-1 again. So I'm going to go around the circle a couple of times. All right, so now give it one last pull tight, and we're gonna tie a half hitch knot to secure our thread. What I like to do is take the needle underneath my last 2 seed beads that are coming after one of my big 8s. So I'm taking it under that bar there that the 2 11s makes. I'm gonna pull that almost all the way through, but before I pull it all the way through, I'm going to take my needle back through the loop that it makes in order to tie a half hitch knot. So pull that really tight. I like to do another one. Make sure that that knot is landing in between 2 of the beads and not catching over the top of any of the beads. And we're going to tie another one. What a lot of times I'll do if I am planning to string this whole big tube like a bead, I will travel to another spot, tie another half hitch knot or a couple of half hitch knots, but I'll show you how I'm going to be finishing this one off and you'll see why that's not necessary. So what I like to do in order to get a nice clean cut is I put my beadwork down on my surface and I use a thread cutter. I pull up on my thread and I carefully trim my line. And once you give it a little bit of a pull, you've got a nice clean cut. Now we're going to do the same thing with our tail end at the other side that we started with. So you can see I have a variety of samples here of the Russian spiral stitch. Basically what we've just made is a big long bead. So you can string it like a big long bead. So it has a hole, it's a tube. You can actually string it right on the jeweler's wire and crimp a clasp to it and you've made a beautiful bracelet. That's not what I'm going to do today. I'll show you what I'm going to do in a minute, but I just kind of want to dive into stringing it on jeweler's wire and show you some samples of what you can do. So one tip that I can share with you, if you plan to string through this like it's a bead, you can use like a coffee stirrer straw and kind of string that through first. Then string your wire through. That way the wire doesn't poke out through the beadwork. Then remove the coffee straw with the wire still in it. And then you're able to, well, with the wire still in the beadwork. And then it just kind of saves you a little bit of time from struggling with the wire coming out of the netting that we've done here. Another tip that I can share with you is I like to always finish my beadwork off with something that is big enough that it's not going to poke back into your beadwork. So you can see here we've finished this bracelet off with some 6mm bicone crystals. And that just kind of gives it a nice tapered look and adds a nice design element. So here you can see that we've finished it off with some bead caps. So you'd use something kind of like this. These are our great tiara cast bead caps, and these are just kind of like the perfect size for most of our size 8 and size 11 Russian spirals. We'll link those down below. Now with this, I like to just put a bead cap on, maybe a little accent bead at the end, and then crimp right to my clasp, and it gives it a nice finished look. You can also string your beadwork directly onto a cord. So you can use this as a necklace. This is a 6mm bicone, a size 6 seed bead, and then a size 8 seed bead for the smaller bead. You can see how it makes more of like a netted rope, so it's a little bit more loose and a little bit more flexible, but it makes a great statement piece. So using different sizes of seed beads is certainly possible for this, but realize that you'll get different tensions and you'll make either a more compact and compressed rope or one that's a little bit looser and more flexible. Another option that I want to show you is that you can also use Swarovski crystals in your beadwork. So this is a bracelet that is using 4mm bicone crystals, and you'll want to match those up with a size 8 seed bead. So we've got a 4mm bicone crystal and a size 8 seed bead, and then a size 11 seed bead for the smaller one. Now all of these have been strung through and then crimped to a clasp. But what we're going to do today is a lot easier. So what we're going to do today with our beadwork is we are going to glue an end cap onto it. So we have these great end caps here, and these will also be linked down below. These are glue-in end caps, and you can see here on one of them I've already connected my clasp to it using a jump ring. So you can make sure to use a jump ring of your choice or a couple of jump rings to vary the size. You might want to end your beadwork a little bit shy and then add length if needed with your jump rings, because you can easily get a little bit too long with your beadwork, and it's a lot easier to add length than to take it away. Now what I'm going to do is use E6000 glue. You can use any kind of epoxy glue of your choice, I'm going to put a little bit of glue right into my end cap. I make sure to get it on both sides. You don't want so much glue that it's going to squeeze out and be messy, but you want enough that it's going to kind of pour into the holes between our beadwork. I like to give my beadwork a little bit of a twist, make sure all the beads are sitting nicely, and then I put my bead cap right onto it. I give it a little bit of a twist to make sure the glue gets everywhere, and then I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side. So I glue on both sides, give the end a little bit of a twist, make sure all the beads are sitting where they need to sit, and then push it into my bead cap. Now, depending on your tension and depending on your beads that you're choosing, you'll likely need different sizes of end caps. So it's best to do your cord first, or make your Russian spiral rope first, and then you can choose the size of your end cap. So I'll go ahead and use my pliers and attach a jump ring and my toggle side to this side of the clasp, and we'll have a finished bracelet. Thank you so much for joining us today to learn how to make the Russian spiral bracelet. If you enjoyed watching this video, please give it a big thumbs up. It really helps our channel out. If you have any questions or if you'd just like to say hi, you can leave a comment down below. I do my best to respond to all the comments that anyone might leave below. If you really liked this video and you'd like to see more, please subscribe to our channel. We put out new, easy DIY jewelry tutorials all the time. And if you really want to help support our channel even more, you can check out our Patreon. Patreon is just a way to help support our channel with a monthly subscription. There's lots of fun perks to becoming a Patreon member, like a private Facebook group and quarterly giveaways, so make sure to check that link out below. Thanks for watching.